Welcome to Dangerous Pleasures, Mixing Reality, Speculative Fiction, and Ecological Precarity While the World Ends. I'm Jessica FitzPatrick, and I'm here to warn you that this is a new project, one that brings together two arenas. The first are portrayals of escape and resistance as expressed in world science fiction by authors of the Global South who identify with communities more susceptible to effects of the Anthropocene. The second are virtual and augmented reality development teams operating at the edge of our technological ability to fictional world build. By bringing these two arenas together, I hope to invite us to consider what our field is already doing and also where it might go and how we can more productively get there. How do we make people care about the planet? Ursula Heise articulates that environmental appeals have always mobilized both narrative craft and advanced technology to help audiences grasp the importance of the planetary. The engineering feats enabling NASA's Earthrise, Blue Marble, and Pale Blue Dot photographs allowed for heavily circulated visual messages, ones that say we are all alone together on Earth, and that here, as Sagan said, is where we make our stand. Heise points out that the static emotional appeals of these NASA images has transitioned more recently into the infinite zooming capabilities of the internet tool Google Earth, thereby marking a formal as well as a conceptual shift. While she is interested in the possibilities of information and database, I'd like to focus on the element of audience-controlled zoom, of the shift of environmental emotional appeals into interactive media. After all, we're now well into the time when AR and VR tech is in the hands of a relatively sizable audience. That doesn't mean that these are perfect technologies. They're not. There are questions of environmental cost, accessibility of global position, user needs, and financial viability. Though we've seen an increase in VR, AR, and 360 availability and the use over the past decade in industry, education, and entertainment arenas, these technologies are not ubiquitous. They also have a question of sustainability as platforms updates, projects go out of access. For this talk, augmented reality or AR will reference computer-generated content overlaid onto the real world. Users often interact with AR installations through their physical movement. Virtual reality, or VR, will refer to totally designated virtual environments, designed ones where the user can engage with virtual elements through headsets and hand controllers, often corresponding to a digital body or avatar. I will use 360 video or 360 to refer to captured footage of our non-virtual world. Projects can, of course, also hybridize these techniques. A quick note, I too love video games, and there's engaging work being done in Anthropocene topics through traditional gaming platforms. Since PC and console video games are far more widespread, there are also significantly more speculative titles to examine. One of them seems particularly useful for the topic of my talk today. The Climate Trail by William Volk takes on the scaffolding of the Oregon Trail and turns it into a game about climate refugees. Volk was partially inspired by the damning story A Full Life by Paolo Bacigalupi. This is obviously a useful Anthropocene science fiction game example. However, as you can see, it's not overly immersive. The ability to bring you into real experiences of story worlds is the reason why I focus on AR, VR, and 360. They allow a new way to produce stories anchored in local, embodied, and place-focused understandings. Active immersion aligns with Bacigalupi's suggestion that in Cli-Fi, quote, you have the chance of making people engage not with the future, but with the intense realities of our present, end quote. This engagement can often happen viscerally. Immersive and interactive media are designed to offer such experiences. They promise to bring environment, scale awareness, and narratives to players in new ways to make them feel effects in places that are probably otherwise too distant. Already, climate change projects use this place-focused tech. In the Stanford Ocean Acidification Experience, CO2 molecules are made visible in the virtual environment. The description reads, most people have never heard of ocean acidification. Visualizing the impact to marine life is challenging. As a solution, Stanford researchers have produced a virtual underwater ecosystem to allow you to observe firsthand what coral reefs are expected to look like by the end of the century. The designers suggest that improving common knowledge can be achieved through a VR title and that users will value this newfound knowledge because of their lived experience of marine change. Similarly, Coral Compass designers question if VR experiences can alter the minds of climate change deniers. Their experience is a 360 documentary, one that brings users down into the reefs in a way that doesn't threaten that natural landscape. unlike the clumsy kicking fins of eco-tourists. Making endangered environments accessible without further disrupting those environments may be invaluable. These Stanford projects activate Rebecca Evans's position of the Anthropocene as, I quote, a novum that differentiates it from a prior sense of the world, integrates that novum into a future-oriented but historically grounded narrative, and uses that narrative to direct every examination of modernity. A large part of this work occurs through edutainment. Swampscapes offers a K-12 teaching package, including a VR documentary and games about the Everglades. This project studies the results of their package on students and found positive correlations between interactive media and the lessons of the intended criteria. Swampscapes was built to explore how they could use VR to cultivate care about a site that is inaccessible to most people, to create a virtual field trip for youth with no means or interest in wading through a swamp. Worthy of note, they also worked with local community members to produce their project. In their 2002 chapter on augmented reality applications for developing the understanding of the Anthropocene, Lily Yan et al. Surveyed explicit Anthropocene AR projects in English created between 2009 and 2019. They found 14 results. Of these, 8 titles were still supported and active. One of these was After Ice, a short mobile AR app that shows if a user's location will be underwater in 2080, after the ice melt. This augmentation offers a watery filter over a user's surroundings. Submerged areas include animated fish. We know that many science fiction narratives position technologies like these as modes of distraction, censorship, appropriation, eco-procrastination, and control. You may notice that those themes are in tension with everything I've already said. They may actually serve as a test case for immersive cyber engagement. Much as science fiction and computer science courses use SF to encourage engineering, computer, and information science students to think about ethics. But if we're relegating this connection to a one-course offering, it's vital to decolonize the readings we put in conversation with our real-world tech. Indigenous writers, writers from the Global South, writers published in the last decade, all are underrepresented in these computer ethics syllabi and lists. Partially, this is because writers of these communities engage with ideas relevant to this design field in books not categorized as VR or AR stories. When they do, they're easier to find and flag. Rebecca Roanhorse, for example, has appeared as a key text in these syllabi because her Welcome to Authentic Indian Experience TM deals explicitly with cultural appropriation in VR design, but many other celebrated SF texts could be included. The ones listed here aren't all text stories, but they do caution that immersive technologies, bio or digital, draw people away from their place anchors. They caution that lived experiences of place are important for dismantling systems of oppression and combating environmental malaise. They insist on the value and connection of lived experience to a world undergoing Anthropocene levels of change. They critique the way that certain lived experiences, places, and bodies are discounted, disconnected, hijacked, and repurposed. In the age of VR and AR, these are the lessons we should be actively designing with. In Yan et al.'s survey, they posit that the Anthropocene is a crisis in the way we think, but it is clear their understanding of we is limited. Decolonizing these new media stories and design modes will continue advances in climate change discourse by figures like Shelley Strebe and Grace Dillon, and advances in design fields like Sasha Costanza-Chalk's recently published Design Justice, which encourages designers to partner with, not appropriate from, communities. And there is space for such design work. Looking at the existing AR and VR titles, and you can see them on the screen, it's clear this industry knows that SF consumers are in place, but there's a lack of cli-fi new media. In their work on Anthropocene texts, ones that do more of a survey, Deborah Jordan and Abram and Jane Main suggest that we not only consider the texts marketed as Anthropocene or climate change, but also ones engaging in these themes and questions at different levels in order to more accurately see how Anthropocene stories circulate. Their approach also offers us more new media titles outside the edutainment realms. Let's start with augmented reality. The Gardens of the Anthropocene app was designed by Tomiko Thiel. The AR experiences are not in themselves narrative, but Thiel shares that the context is a science fiction future in which native aquatic and terrestrial plants have mutated to cope with the increasing, unpredictable, and erratic climate swings. All plants in his AR renderings are derived from actual native plants that are tolerant respectively to drought on land or to warming seawaters. Therefore, they're more likely to survive in the upcoming climate-changed world. They'll exaggerate plant adaptations, and you can see this a bit on the pink flower here, to feeding off mobile devices' electromagnetic radiation and transgressing boundaries between underwater and dry land. In order to enjoy this landscape, which may feel like Vandermeer's Area X, users do have to physically travel. These installations are location anchored. Although they had blooms on both east and west coast of the United States, not everyone could access them. On one hand, location-based AR allows for place-based meaning. The plants extrapolated in these experiences are native to the Pacific Northwest. With localized engagement, such AR might encourage players to consider their location as a place and part of an environment network. On the other hand, such locative anchors restrict access only to those who are physically proximate. When we consider sci-fi VR titles related to the Anthropocene, we see a cluster of planet games. Extraterrestrial extrapolation and exploration is particularly lush in VR, where we can finally find ourselves in an alien world. But placing players on alien planets also continues the separation of the human from nature. In games like Robinson the Journey, which adapts Robinson Crusoe's plot, and the Solus Project, which strands a post-Earth human wannabe colonist, players are positioned as outsiders on the alien planet, separate and semi-antagonistic to the natural world. Sci-fi's VR game 1111 is also set on an alien planet, one wrecked by corporate warfare. When the non-corporate inhabitants unite and rebel, the rich ruling corporation community decides to leave the planet in spaceships and bomb all life stuck planetside. The parallel to Earth's Anthropocene plight is pretty obvious. Once again, we're on an alien planet, an island in outer space. In her Allegories of the Anthropocene, Elizabeth DeLaury explores the Anthropocene through Caribbean and Pacific island narratives. She challenges the idea that islands are only useful as ecological morality tales, or as labs in utopia and dystopia stories. She challenges the idea that islands, quote, a tabula rasa for the making and unmaking of worlds, end quote, can't be nuanced. The alien planets of Robinson and Solaris function in the way that she critiques. But there are alternatives, and I think 11 and 11 shows us one might be to avoid positioning players as a colonist. In 1111, the agency of the player is restrained to exploring preset storylines of 6 on-planet characters, showing what moral choices they make in moments right before the bomb detonates. We are not ourselves an active agent or a character in this story. The focus of 1111 is its intertwining narrative. The characters' stories intersect at various points, and by following all the storylines, players can get a full sense of the story of this world. As the trailer shows, there are a variety of ways to play. From a free-ranging exploration mode, to a character-anchored storyline mode, to a feature called Goddess mode, which, like Google Earth, players can use to zoom and explore story intersections through scales of planetary, or at least upper altitude, and street-level experiences. If players choose to follow only a couple of characters or explore fleetingly on their own, they develop a partial and probably skewed understanding. Having such an experience loadable in VR and kept to a short time frame makes it more likely that players will take the opportunity to engage with each character. In this way, 1111 not only makes a blunt statement about world-ending capitalism, but also critiques the isolated bubbles created by privilege. Players are rewarded the most if they care about different characters and explore the story environment. Both place and community become important to listen to. The tight temporal binding and recursion of this world keeps players always in the final moments of corporate-caused planetary apocalypse, something that perhaps we should all consider. Perhaps these post-apocalypse narratives gesture to the budding realization that the Anthropocene will be an indiscriminate apocalypse compared to the multiple world endings that we've already seen throughout human history. And here I'm especially thinking with Grace Dillon's framing of native apocalypse and with Afrofuturism's long engagement with the reality that Armageddon been in effect for Black communities. Yet we know that long before the point of planetary collapse, there will continue to be unequal fallout. Because of these ranging experiences, the question of who designs AR, VR, and 360 matters. As Chakrabarty writes, the shift to working on and about the Anthropocene requires that we do not ignore context. For, and I quote, a crisis that concerns humanity as a whole cannot ever be adequately addressed if the issues of justice, power, and inequality that divide and fragment the same humanity are overlooked in the narratives we tell ourselves. The way those narratives are built should also be scrutinized. There are movements like the Aboriginal territories in cyberspace, which work to make game design skills more accessible. one can only hope, and then fight for, that the arena selling itself on world building and immersion, this industry, will have room for members with a range of lived experiences and cultural worldviews. Inclusive speculative fiction and computer science syllabi is only part of the answer. Design team diversity is certainly another part. And perhaps AR, VR, and 360's focus on placed experiences can also offer science fiction writers and critics another way to grapple with the Anthropocene. Thank you.